June 1866. A slow mail train chugs through an Indiana woodland when suddenly, bullets ring out. The America's first train robbery has begun. 5 masked men, led by the audacious Reno Brothers, pounce on their unsuspecting prey. They force the train to a halt, blow open the carriages, and rob the passengers of their valuables, tang. Then they disappear into the woods, making off with around $13,000 worth of gold. That's just over 400 grand in today's money, ka. But the Reno family, proud farmers turned outlaws after the Civil War, were driven by more than greed, with former soldiers among them and a thirst for revenge against railroad barons. Frank, John, Simeon, and William Reno crafted a plan that would go down in history. Under cover of night, the gang pried up the iron rail, forcing the locomotive to a halt. With revolvers drawn, they herded terrified passengers out onto the tracks and rifled through safes and mailbags before vanishing into the trees, leaving only spent casings and shattered glass behind. When the dust settled, the tally was astounding: roughly $13,000 in gold and other valuables stolen in a single 10-minute heist. Newspapers dubbed it the robbery on the Madison and Indianapolis Railroad, and a $5,000 reward was posted for each brother's capture. There are 3 things certain in life: death, taxes, and the betrayal of the Reno brothers. This is the story of one of America's greatest train heists. Lowmen and Pinkertons swarmed the countryside, but the Reno brothers slipped through every trap, until infighting and betrayal tore the gang apart. Some fled to Canada, others met violent ends. Their legend, however, lived on as the daring architects of America's first rail robbery. Frank, John, Simon, and William Reno were born in Illinois and Indiana, respectively. Between 1828 and 1839, despite the brothers' different origins, they forged tight bonds with their siblings. During the turmoil of the Civil War, the brothers joined the Union Army, fighting to preserve the Union. After the war ended, the brothers set out to buy land of their own, dreaming of a better life. However, their real estate ambitions took a dark turn when they learned that the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad planned to build a line near their farmland. The brothers saw this as a threat to their way of life. If the railway went ahead, it would mean that the peace and quiet of their rural homes would be shattered by the constant chugging of trains, not to mention the risk to life from being mowed down by an out-of-control engine. They weren't the only ones who felt threatened. Across the country, landowners watched helplessly as railroads carved up their property, causing massive headaches for local residents. As one example, in 1864, the same year the Civil War ended, the New York Central Railroad built a line right across the middle of Seneca Lake, cutting off access to the water. Faced with resistance from land tycoons, railroad companies were taking extreme measures to keep building their lines. In fact, they even formed their own private police forces, known as Pinkerton National Detective Agency, or Pinkertons for short, whose job it was to stop protesters dead in their tracks. Led by Allen Pinkerton, a man with a shady past. These Pinkertons didn't think twice about turning violent if it meant keeping construction on track. Talk about a rough ride. So the Reno brothers decided to take matters into their own hands. Why should railroads have all the power? Inspired by the legendary Jesse James, who had successfully robbed several trains in Missouri and Kansas, the Reno brothers hatched a plan to rob the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. They knew the area like the back of their hands, because they had worked there during construction, and now they were ready to put their knowledge to good use. They chose a remote stretch of track surrounded by thick woods, where they knew a train carrying government payroll would pass. The secluded spot made it easy for them to ambush their target without any witnesses. It was June 6, 1866, when the train pulled up outside the lonely McLeod station in Indiana. Only 2 passenger carriages sat on the tracks, along with a baggage car and the engine. A small group of travelers waited inside the station, which doubled as a general store, hoping for a quick ride to Indianapolis. But they had no idea what was in store for them. Carlung. A posse of masked men emerged from the woods and blocked the train's path. The outlaws weren't afraid to make their presence known. One of them held aloft a red lantern, while another fired his gun into the air to let the conductor know they meant business. It was time for a holdup. As people started pouring out of the carriages, the brothers split up, covering every possible escape route and forming a human barricade around the train. They ordered everyone to lie down, then rummaged through the luggage until they found the 2 mail bags filled with gold destined for distribution in Western Union, Indiana. The robbers also made off with about $3,000 in cash, 2 pistols and 5 gold watches belonging to the passengers. And that's not all. When she's quiet, she's like the men also stole a large quantity of whiskey from the baggage car. All in all, their haul amounted to around $13,000, equivalent to about $400,000 in 2021. But how did the brothers pull off this audacious feat? How does one mastermind a train robbery? Turns out they'd spent months planning the heist. They chose a remote stretch of track surrounded by thick woods, where they knew a train carrying government payroll would pass. The secluded spot made it easy for them to ambush their target without any witnesses. But that wasn't all. To avoid detection, they put William, the youngest of the 4, in charge of communication. Kept a lookout at a safe distance and used a red flag to signal when the coast was clear for the robbery. As soon as the men were ready, William placed a red handkerchief on the rail to alert the train's engineer. When the conductor realized there was trouble ahead, he hit the brakes, and the train screeched to a halt, with the passengers safely secured. The brothers and their accomplices had plenty of time to search the carriages without any interference. So it was that, in less than 10 minutes, tearing gang had managed to pull off one of the most audacious train robberies in American history. But their victory was short-lived. The authorities weren't going to take this lying down, and the brothers knew they couldn't stay in the area for long. They melted away into the sprawling wilderness of southern Indiana, staying one step ahead of the law. With rewards on their heads, The men were forced to hide out in caves and makeshift camps, evading capture while living off the land. As the manhunt intensified, the brothers grew desperate. Leaving their old life behind seemed impossible now. Each passing day brought them closer to violence. Then came the tragic news that broke their small gang. 2 of the 5 men, Thomas and Jim McCombs, had been cornered by a posse. As the brothers mourned the loss of their friends, they faced an uncertain future. With authorities closing in, it was only a matter of time before they too would be caught. Now the question wasn't if they'd be arrested, but when. In the end, it was betrayal that led to their downfall. One by one, the remaining brothers fell victim to it. First to go was John. He'd always been the wild card in the family, prone to risky behavior that put their plans in jeopardy. Kung. His brothers had grown tired of his antics and decided to cut their losses. They left him behind when they fled, and he was soon captured. Facing a hefty prison sentence, John turned informant, leading the authorities right to his brother Frank. No doubt the promise of leniency sweetened the deal, capturing Frank. The authorities moved in on William and Simon Kova, but they proved elusive, managing to escape again and again. Eventually, Simon got cold feet and decided to surrender. In exchange for a noble sum of $5,000, he spilled the beans on his brother and the gang's hideouts. Soon enough, William was captured, too. It was a bitter end to their adventures. What happened next is a tale of tragedy. William served just 10 years of his 20-year sentence before his release in 1876. But his freedom was short-lived. Only 2 years later, Key was shot and killed during a botched robbery in Texas. Frank died in 1895 while serving his life sentence at Michigan State Prison. John, meanwhile, lived a long life, dying in 1921 at the age of 72. Simon, who'd turned informant, didn't fare as well. He was murdered in 1882, just 7 years after his release from prison. Their legend, however, lived on as the daring architects of America's first rail robbery. 2. Do you know any Lucernoan history stories you'd like to share with the world? Or perhaps you have an intriguing question about the past that's been keeping you up at night. Either way, drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's keep the conversation going. While you're at it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an exciting new episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.